Hello, my name is Robert Bell, and I am Executive Director of the Space and Satellite Professionals International. Welcome to Making Leaders, a series of conversations with people who have become leaders of this fast-changing industry and who are helping forge a new generation of leaders to take us into the future. It's a part of SSPI's Promise to Purpose campaign, which brings people of great promise into careers of great purpose in our industry. Making Leaders is made possible by a grant from Korn Ferry, which provides executive search, leadership development, and data on engagement and compensation to companies around the world. We're also grateful for the continuing financial support of our Promise to Purpose mission from SSPI sponsors Arianespace, Boeing, Planet, and SSL. Today, we're speaking with Vice President and General Manager of Military Space for Lockheed Martin, Kay Sears. At Lockheed Martin's website, they say, other companies talk about going to space. We're already there. The company has been there in space for military, civilian government, and commercial customers for decades. Space generated $9.5 billion in net sales for the company in 2017. The major programs under Kay's watch include the Advanced Extremely High-Frequency Secure Satellite Network, the Global Positioning System that we all use every day, the Defense Meteorological Space Program, Mobile User Objective Systems, Space-Based Infrared Systems, Space Protection, and other Defense Department programs. Before joining Lockheed Martin, Kay was president of Intelsat General, the government services unit of Intelsat, and she also helped launch government service units at both G2 Satellite Solutions and Veristar. In 2009, she was appointed to the President's National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, and she serves on the board of the Space Foundation. Kay sat down for an interview with a member of SSPI's Rocky Mountain chapter, Michelle LaMar.
So let's kind of start back in the beginning. Let's think back to your college years. In general, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do when you set out?
So I was a business major, and I really enjoyed my classes related to strategy development and marketing. So I had these lofty expectations that I was going to be some marketing executive, advertising executive in New York City. And then I took an interview with a representative from the Department of Commerce. And in that one interview, I just completely changed my whole idea of what I wanted to do. He was talking about some of the satellite weather programs that the Commerce Department runs through the National Weather Service and some of the other major systems that Commerce has. And I just started becoming so intrigued with space and in particular some of these weather sensors that he described. And almost overnight I changed my direction, and that was my first job with the Department of Commerce. So to answer your question, no, it didn't pan out exactly the way I thought, but I absolutely love where it's taken me.
That's great. So it sounds like you were very interested in space as soon as you heard about it. So what kind of steered you to the government or military sector?
So I just feel that the military space missions that we build systems for and that we deploy to warfighters just have such criticality. And I've always thought of space as kind of the ultimate high ground. And so the systems that we're putting out there and the capabilities that they provide and the ability to protect our nation and those kinds of things are just very motivating for me. So I did become a real space geek and really got into what space can deliver. And I started in the communication side, in the commercial communication side, and so now here at Lockheed I've had a huge opportunity to learn all the other space missions from navigation and timing across OPIR, missile warning, and all the other protected comm networks. And also on the civil side, some of the things we do in planetary and in space exploration. So it's just been an eye-opening experience for me, even now in this part of my career, because I've learned all the other things that space brings to the nation.
Mm-hmm. So kind of thinking back again to your early career years, what were some of the challenges that you faced as a woman starting out kind of in an engineering-centric industry?
Yeah, you hit it, engineering. So I learned very quickly that in order to be in the space industry, you really had to be technical. and I was not an engineer, so I spent a lot of time kind of coming up to speed and learning the technical lingo, all the acronyms, and some of the basic concepts of space, orbitology, things like that. I'm not deep in the technical side, but I do feel that it's something that you have to have in order to work closely with engineers and in order to explain some of the concepts and some of the solutions. I've been on the solution side most of my career, and so explaining that to people who are not in the space industry, maybe to acquirers or to people who have to budget for that, or to some of the leadership who might not be deep in space. So that was a challenge, coming up to speed technically. And then in the early part of my career, while I was working, I also got my master's degree in business, and I focused on IT systems at that time. And that was tough, working and going to school at the same time. But I recommend it because I was able to apply what I was learning at night. I was able to apply during the daytime, during a job. So instead of just being in school and being surrounded by that educational, you're able to apply it to a work environment. So I felt like that was a good dedication of time, but it was pretty challenging during those years trying to get my master's. And then we can talk later about work-life balance, but that is always a challenge throughout the career, being a woman, raising a family, and yet with the having to perform your job, and in my case, a lot of travel. I've always had a lot of travel as part of my job. So those were some of the challenges. There were also key decision points that you have to make in your career, and I think those can be challenging. They can certainly be a little stressful. I had to make decisions about moving out of one function into sales, for example. That was a big decision for me. I had some good mentors saying, no, you need to get in sales. That really fits your personality, and it really did. I found kind of my sweet spot there. Dealing with customers and managing accounts, customer accounts, that really became kind of the sweet spot and where I started to move up in my career.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, let's go ahead and touch on work-life balance. Have you figured it out yet?
I can't say I have, the cliff notes on work-life balance. I do think it comes down to that support group around you. It certainly comes down to your spouse. It comes down to communicating, really setting expectations around what you want to accomplish in your career early on, and how you want to raise your family. So there's quite a few critical conversations that have to happen between you and your spouse when you're looking at a two-career family and you're looking at kids and children in different ages. I do think that work-life balance changes over time as your kids go through different ways that they need their parents or that they associate with their parents. It's almost easier to balance it when they're young than it is when they're in their critical teenage years or mid-school years, if that makes sense.
Yep, it definitely does. So it definitely sounds like you are a quick learner and get up to speed quickly. So can you tell us about kind of your first step into leadership?
I would say, looking back, my first step in leadership, and I probably didn't realize it at the time, but managing a customer account is a lot like leading an organization. So you can't do it on your own. You're very dependent on other parts of the organization and other people. So in the communications, in the satellite communications job that I had some major broadcasting accounts like NBC, who were using satellites for satellite news gathering and to bring images back around the entire world. And so you had to really think about not only the solutions, and you were on call 24/7. You really were deep into the operations. So you could get a call at any time. And you had to lead a team of engineers. You had to lead a team of people who were going to make sure that what you were delivering on your financial commitments. So I kind of thought of it as a little P&L. And then from that, managing those kind of broadcast accounts, I moved into managing account managers who had those accounts. And so, kind of a step up in leadership there. And then you weren't directly involved, but you had to kind of set the vision and clear hurdles for people, make sure that everybody was executing and again delivering on their financial commitments, making sure that customer communication was happening. You were kind of the escalation point. So the leadership challenge changed a little bit. It was a lot more collaborative, and you had to bring in different kinds of management style at that time. I do believe that your management style is really a function of your personality. It's kind of how you deal with people. I don't think it changes when you walk into an office. You don't change your personality. So your management style is inherent in that. But you do pick up things along the way in your experiences. You pick up management tactics that might work or might not work. And we can talk through some of those experiences as well. But I would say I eased into leadership through account management and then gradually moved up on the sales and marketing side of the house for the most part. And now in the job I have today, it's not as much account management, although there's a lot of customer interaction, but it's more on the program side, again with a strategy element and all the other functions of running a profit and loss center of the company.
Mm-hmm. Well, it certainly seems like you have a lot of experiences to build on. How do you think that your background influences the leader you are today?
So I think we go through stages mostly driven by the market, and your leadership style really has to take that into account. So I'll give you an example. We all went through the time of the Gulf War and some of the war on terror where the national defense industry was growing like crazy. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of contracts out there. There was a lot of business. It was almost as much as you could do, it was there. And that's one kind of market condition that drives a leadership style or a set of leadership qualities. And that lasted for a decade, maybe a decade and a half. But then, there was the other side of that, right? So
Definitely.
The downturn of that. And so then you have to lead in a declining market. And then you're thinking from a leadership perspective, how do you keep people motivated? What kinds of skill sets do you need in a declining market versus the up market? How do you incentivize people? How do you make the hard decisions around cost cutting and things like that? So I think that variation, that's going up and then down and responding to those different market conditions, I think provides a leader with the kind of agility that seems to be what we face every day today. Mm-hmm. So if we think about the threat environment, or we just think about the economics, or how the world has become much more globalized, those market changes happen so fast. So that ability to adjust and be an agile leader, I think I picked up through some of those experiences.
You've been a mentor to me personally, and I've been so fortunate to have that. Have you had your own mentors and who have been influential in your life throughout your career?
Yeah, I've been incredibly fortunate with the people that I've worked for. I'll start with my dad, because my dad was in the Air Force, and so I was around the uniform and I lived on bases. I grew up in that environment, and he was actually an acquirer, so not that I could make that connection at the time, but I do have a definite affiliation to the military personnel, and certainly feel passionate about the missions now. So I'll start there, and then in my working life, I've been so fortunate to work for people who not only cared about my success, but actually helped create movement upwards and added responsibility. The occasional piece of advice when I was making a bad decision, but just I think that caring aspect. So not just being a boss, and not just being demanding, but a caring and demanding boss, I think is the ultimate. And I've had several of those. To name a few, Robert Twining, I'll never forget. I was questioning whether I should move into sales, and he just said, seriously, do you know yourself? I mean, this is exactly what you need to do. And I needed that push because I wasn't sure if that change was going to be good for me. So I'll never forget that conversation, and it turned out really well. And Tom Eaton was one of my bosses at Pan Amsat. Again, he really saw, I think, the future of the government business. So he said, I want you to go out and create this government business unit. And he gave me the independence and the dollars and gave me some vision, but he really let me go work that. And that turned out to be another great success for me. So I look back very favorably on the bosses that I've had. Most of them have been very willing to recognize my talent, trust in me, give me additional responsibility, and then those amazing pieces of advice that you get along the way.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about your team and maybe forming a team of your own as you add new team members, what key attributes are really things that you look for in team members and as a cohesive team?
So I look for critical thinking skills probably first and foremost. Doesn't really matter the job or the function. I definitely expect people to be able to think about circumstances, to be able to look at alternatives, to be accountable, to make decisions and stand by those decisions. So that's probably the first skill set. I definitely look for how they think about their team. Again, this idea of gaining respect through caring but demanding leadership. So I'm looking for some of those leadership qualities. I'm certainly looking for their expertise in that field. As I said before, we run these massive programs, and there's a whole set of skill sets that need to be deployed onto each of those to make them successful. And being sure that you're delegating down to that level so that we can execute efficiently. Not everything has to bubble up, to the top. So I'm really looking for that delegated leadership, accountability, ownership, and then this critical thinking wrapper that has to happen almost at every level and across every function.
Mm-hmm. So we talked a little bit before about how dynamic our industry is. And when you think about the people coming out of college and our new grads, what advice would you give them as they set out on their journey?
So this is still along the theme of critical thinking. I do believe an engineering degree is a great base for that critical thinking. I don't think you have to be an engineer or be a practicing engineer necessarily with that degree, but I do think it gives you the critical skill sets and the ability to look at a problem and think about how to solve problems. So I'm a big proponent of that, even though I did not do that myself. I wish I had. That's kind of one of my regrets. I would layer on top of engineering a set of business classes, something that gives you the understanding of how a business has to run. Mm-hmm. So if you think about our shareholders, or you think about the financial metrics that drive our business, cash and EBIT, and understanding, a balance sheet and an income statement, I think it's a killer combination. If a person has that kind of skill set, I think they can bring that skill set to almost any job and be incredibly valuable. The one thing I would add, and I think this has started to become a priority as well in the last decade, is the understanding of software into a business like the aerospace business. So we're very hardware focused, but at the end of the day, the software to me is what's going to start to really drive innovation and change. Some of the software processes that we're seeing, agile development, things like that, really need to be applied to the business overall. So I would add to that killer combination of engineering and some business understanding, this IT, some understanding of IT and software systems, and the kind of the programming and things that go along with that. It's a very iterative process, and it seems to be something that will be part of companies' success in the future.
Right. Yeah, we certainly see that here at Lockheed with the machine learning and artificial intelligence, so you're certainly spot on. So what would you tell mid-career level people who have aspirations to maybe be where you are someday? What advice would you give them?
So I think when you reach that middle tier in your career, you really have to be very goal-oriented. I think, and you have to have a time horizon. I think a 5-year time horizon is a good time horizon for someone in the mid-career, and understand where you want to be in 5 years. Really envision that, set that as your goal, and then determine the steps that you need to take to get there. And it's not just moving around the company, perhaps. It might be a skill set that you need. Maybe it's this software expertise that you don't have. So really trying to navigate those steps to get that skill set, to put that into your quiver, that really positions you to get to your goal in 5 years. And if you get there, then you set the next goal. And some of it involves working for people who you believe in their values, or you believe that they could be a good mentor, or you believe that they will convey maybe a leadership style that you'd like to learn or understand. So it's people, it's skills, and it's having that 5-year plan and being very purposeful about how you navigate your career. And I kind of broke my career into those 5-year chunks, and that was how I kind of moved up and into leadership, was setting those kind of goals.
Great, yeah, that's fantastic advice. So what were some of the key leadership lessons that you've learned along the way?
Well, I have learned that it is definitely not just about you. Your success has so much to do with your team. So you have to hire good people, and you have to value them, and you have to tell them that you value them, because it's not always apparent. We get busy and we don't do, the recognition side of, hey, you did a great job. There's a trust factor that builds in that I think is really important. I've also learned that you have to reward performance. It's not a meritocracy, and so if you reward performance, you tend to be more successful. I've learned that you have to be open with your communication. Transparency always seems to be the right answer. I've not found any circumstances where it's been a good decision to hide something. So transparency. Along with that, don't deviate from your core values. I think that's a really fundamental one as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it definitely seems like you're a people person. So, how important has networking been to you along your career, and how has it helped you get to where you are today?
I think networking is critical. I really do, because I think you can get a little stovepiped when you don't step back and engage at the broader level. Mm-hmm. And I've done networking within the aerospace industry. I've done networking within the satellite industry. But some of the most influential networking opportunities I've had have been actually across industries. Mm-hmm. So I went to a women's networking event. It was kind of an offsite just about a year ago. And it was women from all over industries. There were people from the banking industry. There were people from the food industry there. There were people from some of the investment industries. There were ladies that were running their own companies. It was just entrepreneurs. And it was fascinating to talk about things that I was experiencing and find that was happening in all those other industries as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of people things that would be very common, but even things that are happening in the market and technology. So I found sharing those experiences even outside of the aerospace industry was really rewarding, and getting some tactics from women who are involved in other businesses who could say, oh yeah, we went through a declining market in our industry and here's what we did about it, or we went through we couldn't find good talent, and here's what we did about that. So the problems we face are faced by other industries, and I just found that to be fascinating. So I think networking is important. I think making contacts and understanding people's background and leveraging them, calling them up, establishing a relationship, whether it's a mentorship or even just, hey, can you open this door for me? I've certainly used that, and I have some lifelong friends that resulted from some of the networking events. So not just mentorship, but I think getting out there and getting involved with within the industry, and then also across other industries, really makes you a well-rounded person.
Mm-hmm. So with business being so much about people, I would think that you would have to wear a lot of different hats in the job that you have. So can you describe those different hats that you wear at different times?
Sure. I mean, this job in particular, I think, takes me back to, kind of that general manager hat, where you not only have to execute, which will be very important on the programs that we have. Delivering on those programs is job number one. But other parts of that job, so there's a very big strategic element. It's not just about what we're doing today, it's about what we're going to do in the future. Within that strategic objectives, there's growth and growth strategies, so there's sub-strategies that you have to think about. And then there's a big push to work across the enterprise, both across the Lockheed Martin space enterprise, but even across Lockheed Martin corporate, and maybe even across the industry as an enterprise. And that's really what it's going to take to, I think, make us successful at the next level. You know, we've talked about how fast things are changing. We've talked about the threat that we face in space, and it's going to take an enterprise approach. It's also going to take a partnership. So I think another hat that I'm going to really try to wear and try to drive is a partnership with our customers. Not, you know, you're on one side of the table and I'm on the other, but let's negotiate hard, and then let's get to the same side of the table and go make it happen and have the same incentives and define success in the same way. Because I think if you define success one way and you separate that from the way I'm defining success, then we're not going to get across the finish line, you know, together. And I think it's going to take that partnership. So I see that as another hat. When you're managing people, sometimes you have to be a friend. Sometimes you have to be you have to show some tough love. Sometimes you have to be a mentor. You don't want to make the decision, but you want to guide the person to make the right decision. So there's a whole bunch of different elements in just the human side of being a leader. But those are some of the hats I see. There's multiple hats. Every day you wake up and figure, I wonder what hats I'm going to have to wear today.
Well, I wish we had more time, but it was a pleasure talking to you today. And thank you so much for sharing your career insights, some personal stories, and we really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Michelle.
Like any tech industry, the space and satellite business is driven by the ambition, the knowledge, and the leadership skills of its people. In our Making Leaders series, we take time away from business plans and technology roadmaps to focus on the people making a difference. We thank Korn Ferry for making this program possible, with the additional support of Arianespace, Boeing, Planet, and SSL.